What's up, dog? Tomorrow's going to be July 4th. America's going to be 250 years old. Isn't it kind of crazy that our country is 250 years old? If you think about other countries, they've been existing far, far longer than us. We're relatively new in the system. Like, just take China, for instance. China's been there since the Warring States. And if you look at like Europe still has its old castles. When I visited London a few years ago, I saw a lot of castles, a lot of World War II museums, and I remember going down a street where I turned and there's just this big old, like rocky wall. And the tour guide said this wall existed since World War One and World War Two. And I was like, damn. And it's still there, dude. I don't know if the tour guide was just, lying to me to make this old wall looking kind of, whatever. But they even have a couple of very old, like, pubs. And one of them was like the Cheshire cheese or something. And I just remember going in and it smelled old. When you think about America, America is only 250 years old. I mean, we're older, but we're young compared to everybody else in the world. I like to share two stories that really hold dear to me. I still think about them to this day, and I remember them so strongly. It's almost haunting, but they're really, I guess, good life lessons that I've learned or just understood about other people and Americans themselves. So sit back, get some coffee. I'll try and make it short and memorable. The first story is 9/11. I know we say it as a joke now, but back then it was no joke. It happened. And when it happened, I was in sixth grade. I remember waking up and I see my parents just glued to the TV watching CBS slop or NBC slop and just very, very worried. And I knew something wasn't right. And I asked them, like, what's going on? And they basically said, we've been attacked. And they were just sad. They were sad for the possibility of us going to war. In the school I went to, it was like a Catholic school. And so we did this rotation where, during certain periods, we just moved from, classroom to classroom. So you essentially all your teachers were your teacher, but you had your main teacher. And every teacher that day had their 2 cents. They talked about how sad it is, the cost of life, and it was very depressing overall. There's no happy kid outside playing recess. No fun to be had. It was a serious moment. And a lot of the students did feel that, but they felt it to a way where it was very, very like there was no hope. No teacher gave us any hope whatsoever. All we knew is that somebody attacked us, many innocent people died, and I guess we're going to war, which means more people will die. But there was one teacher that I personally just hated at the time. Think about Miss Finster from Recess or Miss Trumbull from Matilda. And this was this person. Not a lot of people liked her, and a lot of people did pranks. I remember one time a lot of students there was like a grapefruit tree nearby, and they grabbed the grapefruit and threw it at her door. And this was after school when we were in basketball. And peer pressure, like, hey, Joe Star, do you want to like throw grapefruit? And I'm like, not really. That sounds mean spirited. So I did something that at the time I thought was cool, which was grab a bunch of like jump ropes and make like knots. So when you go up to the stairs to the classroom, they'll have to untangle the knot to get in the door. The next day when we went to school, um, my knot was the worst one, and they had to get the janitor to get like a big knife to like cut it open. And I was just like, they're like, guys, shut up, shut up. The homie G's at the time were just laughing. They're like, oh, Joe Star, that's funny, ho, ho, ho. And I'm like, I was not really proud of what I've done. I never got caught. So again, Miss Cahill, sorry. And that was her name, Mrs. Cahill. So we sat down like every other class that day. The first thing Miss Cahill asked was, how are we doing when we entered our homeroom classroom? And, a lot of students shared their feelings. And Miss Cahill did what every other teacher did, is say, everything's going to be okay. It will be bad, blah, blah, blah. But I remember one student rose their hand. This student's question was the same for every other class that day and every other student. They raised their hand, the teacher called them, and the student said, are we going to war? Every other person that day, every other parent, every other adult said, I hope we don't. Ms. Cahill looked at her in the eye, looked at everybody in the room, and with a big smile, she said, you bet your ass we're going to war. And as funny as that sounds, it was empowering. It was based. This whole time, we've heard adults cry and get sad and was just like, oh, it was just so, it was too much pussy shit in the room. But Miss Cahill, as rough and tough as she was, she gave us the truth we needed to hear is that we are going to go to war. And you bet your ass we're going to go in there because nobody fucking messes with America. Our classroom that day, after we heard that statement from her, we were relieved. We focused on school the rest of the day. We opened our books. Miss Cahill said, turn to page whatever. And we started reading together. And then recess, we're the only ones that actually played basketball that day. Every other kid was just moping around, going in circles, just being like, ugh. They're just so depressed about something that was out of their control. Except for us. We knew that the soldiers, America's Avengers, they're going to go in and kick some ass. And we're going to be rooting for them. And how we root for America? By being what we usually do, by being who we are, using our freedom of expression to play basketball, saying, you're fighting for us, dude. You're fighting for the kids playing basketball at second period recess. There's going to be a lot of people in this world that are just going to be very depressed. They're going to be like the doomers. The modern term is the doomer. They're going to be very depressed and they're going to look at an obstacle or an idea and just be sad about it, to struggle against it. But Mrs. Cahill on that day ripped that Band-Aid off, said, yeah, we are going to go to war. You bet your ass. And we're going to kick some ass. And that was a strong lesson. I still remember that. After 20 plus years, I still remember her saying that like it was yesterday. Another story, I went to high school and I had a history teacher called Miss Jenkins. And we did this exercise every week. We took an article in the newspaper, something about politics, read it, wrote something about it that we learned from it, and turned it in. We did it every week. Miss Jenkins wasn't like Miss Cahill, a rough and tough person. She was more like an NPC, for a modern term. Somebody that was generic, kept in their lane, was very private, but showed a lot of responsibility. You knew she was a history teacher, but then that's all you know about her. And one day we were talking about the Vietnam War. And there's a lot of uncles and aunts, maybe a few grandfathers during that time period, that had somebody that was in or affected by the Vietnam War. And when one day, I still remember this day, it was also a very good story and haunting to me. Her friend came and he looked like Sergeant Johnson from Halo. And I remember during that time in high school, Halo was really popular. And I was like, nobody's like Sergeant Johnson. He's a fucking badass. And the door opens. And you see this motorcycle man. He takes his helmet off and he unzips his jacket. And I'm like, Sergeant Johnson? And he walked up to the front, gave her a nice big warm hug, and turned around and talked to us about the Vietnam War. Everybody had a lot of questions, and he was clearly a military man. One kid that didn't know anything about weapons asked him about a grenade and what does it do, and he was nice. He's like, there's no stupid questions, but he went into military detail. He was like, the M95 X3 Series 1 that's classified that nobody knows about. He was going hard, dude. He was talking about how the grenade, it's not just an explosion like in the movies, that there's small little cuts in it that when it blows up, those are called shrapnel and they just go into you. And it was also kind of refreshing because he just told the truth. He just told the truth about that war. And I don't know if anybody had any public speakers about anybody in a war, but there's always some dumb ass kid that raises their hand and says, have you ever killed anybody? For me, I find that question kind of rude and off-putting, but it was always the same answer. No, I didn't kill anybody. No, 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 right? Except Sergeant Johnson. He looked at the kid. He looked at Miss Jenkins to say, is it appropriate? Should I say? And Miss Jenkins looked at him with an NPC glaze. But it was a glaze for us, but not for Sergeant Johnson. I don't remember his name. I'm just going to call him Sergeant Johnson. And he said yes. And it was something that was kind of new for a lot of students in that classroom. And then the next dumbass question is they went to Miss Jenkins, said, have you killed anybody? Miss Jenkins told us that she was a pilot. She operated a helicopter, and while she flew in to try to get injured people out of there, Sergeant Johnson was on that gun. And with a grave acceptance, she said that because she operated the same helicopter that included the machine gun, she said that she was responsible for the deaths that day, just as much as Sergeant Johnson. And it was an interesting acceptance that she disclosed. I don't know what political stance she was on. I don't know if she was liberal or conservative. She did her job as well as she would, being a teacher, neutral, forgiving, and challenging her students. And on that day, she challenged us very well. I never looked at Miss Jenkins the same after that. In fact, I was impressed. The fact that she was in the Vietnam War, she participated in its events, and as much as she did not like the fighting, she knew what she had to do. She had a job to do, and she did it with her fellow Americans. She came to unify during the best and the worst times of that time period, and she kept that burden to herself. Never mentioned it, never gloated about it, just acknowledged it and moved on. And then even after that day, it was just business as usual. Every week had to turn in a current event paper and said what you learn about basically the world, politics, something outside the world. She wanted us to be informed about our day to day lives. That was a nice lesson for her to teach us that every day there's going to be some people that have this burden that they have to just carry with them, a weight. And it's up to the individual to work with that. I don't know if anybody remembered, but during Vietnam, there was a lot of people that were depressed, a lot of mental health issues. They never called it that way. They called it like shell shock and different other words, but it was relatively the same. They went into war. They had a very harsh experience, to say the least. And you even see that in media. I mean, Rambo. If anybody remember the first Rambo movie during that time, it was just him being a drifter and people making fun of him. And then even he came back to his world, America, they just, kicked him to the ground. And then he had to talk face to face to his own colonel, his own superior officer, to say, stand down, it's okay. Or even in like Forrest Gump, you had Lieutenant Dan who lost his legs and he was just being depressed because his friend at that time was just a retard, saying mental health issues. You're on the street, no legs, no help, you're depressed. And during that time in the Vietnam War, there was a lot of mental health issues. They came back lost and defeated, and not a lot of people around them to support. But Miss Jenkins taught us a valuable lesson that day. You're going to go in life dealing with a lot of harsh views of reality. You also have to ask yourself, Miss Jenkins went to war with her good friend, Mr. Sergeant Johnson, and came out dealing with that burden. She has to carry that burden, that weight, for years to come. That's a lot of strength for most of our soldiers in America. How do you go day by day knowing that you've seen or done things that not a lot of people have ever done or seen before? Unfortunately, a lot of people go to booze and drugs, and very few people actually understood and accept what happened and moved on to have a fulfilling life. The fact that Miss Jenkins went with her fellow American, her fellow friend, into a war and came out of it alive and continued her life knowing what happened and pushing people to just know more about their world is kind of very beautiful if you think about it. So those are my two stories. I kind of wanted to save one of the stories for, 9/11, but it is America's 250-year birthday. America has a very interesting and diverse history. But because we're so young, every day that you wake up and go out into the world, you are making that history. You are growing the lore and legacy of America. And your teachers and your elders are paving the way for you to do greatness. I always joke about women and saying that they're just bitches, right? I love America, freedom to own guns, the freedom of speech, and the freedom of women being bitches. And although I degrade women as a joke or just in general because they can't drive, I only do that because I was surrounded by very strong women growing up. And when I see other women being weak, it pisses me the fuck off. They were respectable, they were strong, they were smart and intelligent. When I see other women not having those qualities, it pisses me off. I think it would have pissed you off too. There's probably women out there that just hate certain men because they're not doing what men should do, being a strong, protective foundation. And there's probably some women out there that just hate men because they're not being a strong, protective foundation for them. And they're surrounded by weak men who just want to go to Disneyland every day and live in a fantasy. Everyone has their quirks and the reasons why they don't like things. And one of my quirks about women is that we used to have strong women, strong-willed women. And growing up, I am glad I have met Mrs. Cahill and Mrs. Jenkins. Now, I have other many strong teachers in my life, both men and women of America, and I could probably share those stories on another day. But the top two that I've always remembered was those two. Not knowing what political stance they were, not knowing who they were outside of school, just seeing them as boring, gross teachers. But when they opened the veil for a little bit of reality to give us a life lesson that is a once in a lifetime opportunity, it really affected me. So, as you guys go on July 4th and celebrate the 250 year of America, think about if there was a Miss Cahill in your life. Somebody who's strong that said, you know what, we're just going to kick some fucking ass and not be fucking pussies about it. Or maybe there was a Miss Jenkins in your life that knew the responsibilities of war and how heavy and weighted it is, but decided to still do the job with grace and humility. It was kind of unfortunate because I remember after college, I came back and I saw my local newspaper before it died. I saw Mrs. Cahill in the obituaries. The fact that this person changed my life and made me the man that I am today, I never got to tell her the story. Never said thank you. I think deep down inside, she knew what she was doing. She knew that she was creating the next generation, and she wanted us to be strong about it. Hell, I don't even know if Miss Jenkins is still alive. If she is gone from this world, she probably has the same feeling. So, yeah, remember life, the pursuit of happiness, duty, honor, and the responsibility of being American. Happy birthday, America. Let's do 250 more years. Let's see where it takes us. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye.